Water is a bearer of secrets. It's full of mystery. Professor Bernd Kröplin is a recognized and successful scientist in the aerospace field. Together with his colleague, Regina Henschel, he's been exploring the question, can water pick up and store information? This investigation could shake the foundations of traditional physics.
Diese Aussage, dass das Wasser ein Gedächtnis hat, ändert natürlich.
The statement that water has a memory practically changes our whole way of looking at the world, of course. Let's travel down the Rhine in the figurative sense. The water is flowing down the Rhine, picking up information everywhere it goes. So the water has more information at the mouth of the Rhine than it had at the source. And the Dutch, living at the mouth, when they drink that water, they're also drinking all that information. Thus, the world's oceans would no longer be something that separates us, but instead a giant storehouse of information, and the rain would perhaps be a data medium carrying information to the world.
A great notion. But what kind of information is this? Can we make it visible, or even measure it? In order for experimental results to be considered valid, they have to be repeatable. But how can we look inside a drop of water?
The Aerospace Institute in Stuttgart has discovered a relatively simple way of making the structure of a drop of water visible. The drops are placed on a sheet of glass and allowed to dry. Under the microscope, they reveal fascinating images that can be photographed with a special camera. The researchers have had their efforts rewarded by insights into a very beautiful world. Each drop has a face of its own, unmistakable and unique. Why are the individual drops so different from one another? What do the photographs tell us? Who can interpret them? What information is stored in them, and where did it come from? Perhaps from humankind itself? Here we have person A who does something, and person B who does something, and person C who does something. They've all placed drops on a slide. They were from the same water, and now they've all dried. And each of these three drops looks different. We didn't change anything ourselves, and yet we get three different images. Thus, the differences must come from the three persons. And that, of course, made us want to find out how it could be possible, or better yet, whether it could be possible. So we got a lot of people to come to a lecture hall here at the Institute, gave them all the same water, had them make drops at exactly the same time, collected all the drops, and then discovered that each individual produced different images from the same water. And here you can see the results. Here on the right you can see that the images of the individual students are different, but those made by a given student are all quite similar. This is the work of the first experimenter, this one here from the second, this from the third, and this from the fourth. Individually they can quite easily be reproduced, but you would never have thought that they were all from the same water, because when you compare the images from the different people, you see some big differences. So it must be the case that information from the experimenter, who was holding the syringe in his hand but never touched the water, must have been transferred to the water and was captured in this image.
To what extent is water capable of picking up information? What does it perceive? And how does it remember it over time?
Then we undertook experiments to find out whether things changed when we put something into the water. You can do that, for example, with stones, or with metal, or even with living things, such as twigs or flowers. Here you see a petal from a flower, a real flower. It was placed in the water. A while later we took a drop of water, and we put it on a slide and took a photograph of it after it had dried.
nachdem sie getrocknet sind. Und hier sehen Sie,
And here you can see one of the pictures.
und Sie sehen, dieses Bild ist jetzt
And you can see it in this picture. It's the typical image you get when you put a flower into water.
Sie in jedem Tropfen
You could recognize the flower in every single drop in this glass, of course. That can be reproduced and has significance. And if you were to put a different flower in here, for example, a Sweet William flower, then all the drops of this water would look like Sweet William.
in diesem Wasser. Wissenschaftler fragt man sich
As a scientist, you have to ask yourself, of course, whether there isn't a logical extension of this.
und
What about plants?
einen Versuch gemacht.
And so we tried an experiment that we'd like to call lettuce listening to a mobile phone.
So, wie machen wir das?
Here's what we do.
Wir nehmen ein
We take so-called reference water, that is, water from the institute here, tap water,
Leitungswasser.
and you can see that here in the middle it has a dark spot that you can see in the image.
Der sich im Bild einfach so zeigt.
Well, it has that in every drop.
So, jetzt nehmen wir
So now we take the water, which we have in a big pot,
und da werfen wir
and we simply throw in the lettuce, a real head of lettuce.
und dann nehmen wir
And then we
die
take pictures of it and we can see,
jetzt
aha,
ist dieses
that's
Wasser
lettuce.
und bildet ab in
Now the water knows, and you can see it, that there is a head of lettuce in there.
Ist das dunkle Zentrum verschwunden.
Interestingly enough, the dark center has disappeared. This is something we very often see when we put something living into the water. It produces a bright center. The living thing apparently has a way of forming a center.
So, jetzt nehmen wir einen zweiten
So now we
Salat.
take a second head of lettuce and we let the second head listen to the mobile phone.
Wir schalten einfach ein Handy
That
ein.
means we simply turn on the phone and hold it next to the lettuce for 2 minutes. And we assume that the lettuce has absorbed radiation from the phone.
Nehmen wir diesen Salat.
Now we take this head of lettuce and put it into the reference water as well, and we compare the two results.
Vergleichen wir diese beiden Ergebnisse.
And you can clearly see from the results that the edge is completely different.
Das ist etwas anders.
The middle is somewhat different, so you can see that the lettuce was radiated by the phone and picked up the
Diese
radiation.
Strahlen aufgenommen.
It has imparted that information to the reference water, and if we now take pictures of drops from the reference water where we put the lettuce, we can see from the water that this head of lettuce heard the mobile
An diesem
phone.
Wasser noch erkennen, dass
That's apparently the way nature works.
Handy gehört. Partie wirkt auf diese
One can
Weise
demonstrate that homeopathy works in the same manner.
bisher unsystematisch.
Up to now, we've taken a series of images in an unsystematic manner, and they reveal that potentialization, shaking and diluting, changes the images.
Dann
We've done our own experiments with shaking. In this case, we used ultrasound to agitate the water,
mit Schütteln.
and we could see that the drops changed.
Aber nur geschüttelt mit Ultraschall.
And we could also see that plants grow more rapidly when they are watered with this kind of water.
Wenn sie mit solchem Wasser
And from
begossen
that point of view, there can be no doubt in my mind that there is an effect.
Nicht da gar kein Zweifel.
Because if the image of the drop changes, there has been a change in the informational content. And if the informational content is changed and communicates with the body water from outside or by mixing, then it is also clear that the control function of the body can be different too.
Funktionen des Körpers anders sein können.
Professor Kröplin's team assigns a high priority to their droplet analysis. A simple visit to the dentist can become a spectacular experiment.
Und zwar war das mein Kollege.
And it was one of my colleagues. He went to the dentist. And he had to have an X-ray. And so he thought, I want to have a look at the effect the X-ray has on me. So he took a drop of his saliva and put it in a little tube and left it outside while he was having his X-ray taken. And after the X-ray, he again took some saliva and put it in another tube. And when he got back to the institute, he took some more saliva and put it in a third tube. And then he took the 3 different saliva samples and looked at them under a dark field microscope. And he could see the way his saliva looked before he had the X-ray at the dentist's, a short time later, and the way his saliva looked when he was back at the institute, and it had recovered somewhat. We thought that to be a highly interesting experiment.
Das fanden wir irgendwie einen sehr witzigen Versuch.
And I think all I have to do is wonder how our world will look in 20, 30, or 40 years, you know. Probably our world will have identified these transmission phenomena that we're just now discovering. Some of them will have been identified as phenomena of oscillation, some of them as phenomena of imaging. And when we then systematize them, together with our research into consciousness and medicine, the knowledge will be transferable to the control processes of the body, And we will discover a preventive medicine capable of changing things at an early stage, when there is anything wrong with the body.
Stadium die Verstimmung eines Menschen schon verändert.
What we know is a drop. What we don't know is an ocean. Isaac Newton.